introduce Dr. Denise Murray, Professor Emerita from Macquarie University in Australia and also San Jose State University in California, and Dr. Marianne Christensen, who is a professor at the University of Utah. And they have collaborated on this study, which I think is really interesting. I've read it a couple of times in draft, and we're just delighted that the study is available to you online, and it will also soon be available as an e-reader, the first time TIRF has published an e-reader document. So we're really excited about this. Ryan, thanks for everything you did to make it happen. So let's give our attention to Denise and Matt.
Okay, thank you. I don't need the mic for the way you're recording it, do I?
You do not.
Good, so I hate microphones. Only because I can't walk around and do all those sorts of things that I like to do. We also need to thank Dave Noonan, who's at the back up there. Sorry, David. We're old friends, and I knew him in a former life with a different name. So David was responsible for also helping to fund this award and challenged Anaheim University to match it. And so we're very grateful to David, so thank you. Okay, so let's move on. The reason why we wanted to do this study was we wanted to find out how we could create more effective online environments and what is the most effective course design and how can we assure quality of online language teacher education. So in order to answer those questions, we came up with a list of research questions, if you want a better word. They're formulated somewhat differently in the report as more formal research questions. But we were wanting to look at the characteristics. Why do participants choose this rather than on face-to-face campus programs? What types of technology and course configurations people had experience with, and which did they prefer? And there are some interesting results in that particular area. And what are their perceptions of online learning and its application? In other words, looking at whether they think it is suitable for online language teacher education. So this study, as Kathy has already mentioned, was based on Murray's 2013 TIRF report, which was sponsored by TIRF. And so in order to answer these questions, we needed to, first of all, define what did we mean by online language teacher education. And it was defined a little differently in the 2013 report, because this is the sort of typical way that it gets discussed in terms of the percentage of time that one uses online or not. So I think that's probably a bit hard for some of you to read at the back, is it?
Yes.
Yeah. So could you move forward, please?
Very good.
I'm sorry, but there are going to be a number of slides that are going, the font cannot be any bigger in order for you to be able to see everything that's on the slide at one time. So there are, traditionally, people like the Online Learning Consortium have categorized the online, any sorts of courses, into these 4 areas. So they talked about traditional classes where there is no online teaching at all. Web facilitated, they say, is up to 29% is online, but it's mostly face-to-face with some other components that might have online, such as access to some web pages or a learning management system. And then the 30% to 79%, the blended hybrid type, a course that blends online and face-to-face with a substantial portion of the content actually being delivered online, rather than just sort of an adjunct which is more in the web facilitated. And so you get far fewer face-to-face meetings. And then 80% more is where almost all of the content is delivered online. Okay, so there is a problem with this model, and that is it doesn't really capture the complexity of what online education is. It doesn't really help you understand what is the difference in the configurations of all of these things that are mentioned on the right. So we came up with a different configuration for this particular study. And so we had enhanced, which was face-to-face classes supported by some course activity online. We felt the percentage amount just didn't seem to be a suitable way of making any determinations. The blended, or sometimes it's called hybrid, where face-to-face and online activity with a number of face-to-face meetings reduced, flipped, and we felt that that was an important configuration because it is a way that people often describe how they go about doing online, where the key content is delivered online outside of a face-to-face classroom, and face-to-face time is devoted to problem solving and learning through activity and discussion. And then totally online, we divided into two. Totally online with synchronous, where students meet online at the same time, but not for everything, but it has some synchronous component. Or totally online with no synchronous component, which means that everything is done online. Okay, there's nothing is done where there is real-time interaction. So I'd like a hand up here. Who has taught and enhanced with a little bit of online activity? Okay. Okay, who has taught a blended or hybrid course? Well, now I know why you're here. Who has taught a flipped course? Okay. Who has taught a totally online with a synchronous component? Who has taught a totally online with no synchronous? Okay, very interesting. Now, some of you might be students. Is that the case that somebody couldn't put their hand up because they only took a course like this? Okay, would you tell us which of those you've done?
Right now I'm taking a totally online course.
Okay.
But I've also done the totally online.
Okay, thank you very much, because I don't want to leave you out. Okay, so let's move on to methodology. So we sent questionnaires out to teacher educators and people we call teacher students. We sort of rejected the notion of student trainees, teacher trainees, because we reject the training model, but we really believe that what we're doing is educating when we're in teacher education programs. And we feel that they are teacher students because many of them are already teachers in some of these programs, and many are teachers who are doing some practice teaching and are about to be teachers. So that's what that term is, and we used it throughout the report. So the types of courses and programs available was also in the questionnaire. The configurations of these courses and programs, including right down to the level of activities and technologies being used. The participants' preferences for these activities and technology, and their perceptions of the effectiveness of the courses and various applications that are available and how effective they were for delivering an online course. Okay. So the question types included multiple choice, rank order, and short answer questions. And often, even in the multiple choice and rank order, there were options for a write-in response. So there's quite a lot of quantitative data and quite a lot of qualitative data. The latter has not all been analyzed yet. It's just so vast that we have done some very salient areas so far for this report. So the participants, questionnaires were sent to 185 institutions. Now at this point I need to give TIRF and everybody else the most humble apologies. There is an error in this document that you have, and it's my fault. Not a typist's fault, it's my typo fault. On the second page, the paragraph at the bottom, it says 153 programs were contacted. That is not correct, it was 185. I don't know whether I'd had too much wine when I did that, or why I was flipping numbers or something, but I'm sorry about it. In the full report, it is correct. Okay? So we found institutions by some of the ones that had been in the previous one, people that we knew. When we talked about it in various venues, we got more and more names. We did online searches to find as many institutions as we could. Some of the institutions we were not able to send the questionnaires to because the institution only has a online fill in your name and email and tell us what you want to study, and then we'll send you information. Well, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do that because I don't want to have endless emails from all of these strange institutions. Okay, so the responses that we received were for 137 were from teacher educators and 309 teacher students. Now, one of the things we need to make clear is we do not know that the educators and the students were from the same institutions, right? So you need to keep that in mind the whole time. The participants were very, very diverse, both native speaker, non-native speaker, and from Asia, Australia, Europe, Middle East, North America, and South America. So we were very lucky to get quite a representative group. Okay, the institutions were both public and private, for-profit and not-for-profit, traditional state-sponsored universities, so it was a very wide-ranging group. So now, back to you. We're going to keep going back to you and asking you what you think. So what was the age range of the teacher students and the teacher educators? Which age group was number one for teacher students and teacher educators? So first of all, who thinks that for, let me show you this, for teacher students that they were mostly 50 plus? Who thinks that they were mostly 40 to 49? Who thinks they were mostly 30 to 39? Who thinks they were mostly 20 to 29? Okay. Remember how you put your hand up. Okay. Now for the teacher educators, who thinks they were mostly 20 to 29? Who thinks they were mostly 30 to 39? Who thinks they were mostly 40 to 49? Who thinks they were mostly 50 plus? Would you like to see the data? Yeah. I'll let you just look at it for a minute. And there are the salient ones.
Wow.
So an absolute dichotomy between the teacher students and the teacher educators. The teacher students were the young group, right? And the teacher educators were 50 plus. This not surprising, yeah. We're inclined to think, just as, sort of a gut intuitive reaction that it seems to be fairly representative of the profession. Okay, so let's, what's interesting, of course, is that as we know, most of the 20 to 29-year-olds are considered digital natives. Right? Even though a lot of the research is showing that just because they're in that age group doesn't mean they are necessarily use technology effectively. They might use it a lot. There's quantity, but is there quality? Whereas the 50-plus age group tends to be, digital, what did you call them, Marianne? Immigrants. Not natives. So, we can see that when we come to some other questions of, how comfortable are the teacher educators compared with the students who are in their classes, and who has, the best grasp of the use of these technologies. So let's look at some findings. I'm going to do a few, and then Marianne's going to follow. So who is teaching OLTE, sorry? And I'm going to ask you again, what do you think? So I think you can now all read that list because it's not that small a font, and I'm going to ask you in a moment who thinks one, who thinks two, and so on. Okay? So, who thinks it's mostly experienced teacher educators? Who thinks it's most experienced online instructors? Who thinks it's mostly qualified instructors, that is people with a formal training in online instruction? Who thinks it's teaching assistants? Who thinks it's tutors? Aha, okay. Because some of our expectations were quite different from some of the results too. So 95% of the respondents were experienced teacher educators. And so that should make us feel happy that, you know, we do have qualified people and experienced people who are teaching. But remember, maybe they're the ones who answered the questionnaire. Remember, the questionnaires always have this problem of who answered them. 78% said they had experience with online. 72% said they had experience with online language teacher education. Okay. 70% said that they were qualified instructors. And teaching assistants, only 3% were teaching assistants and only 5% were tutors. Right? But again, it may be the particular institutions that responded. Because I do know from the first OLTE report that there are a number of short courses out there that in fact have the material written by experienced educators, and then the people who teach it online are actually tutors. Whether they actually participated in this project, we don't know because it was an anonymous. Yes, Marianne?
Yeah, just so I remember the two responses from looking at the data said on this particular question, they couldn't answer because there was no apparent teacher. And so I think that shows the range of kind of experiences people have online, that most of the class, I think, was probably done with the online tutor, so you were getting feedback, but it was the intelligent tutor kind of online, and no apparent teacher. So that's interesting too, I think, to keep in mind.
Fun. Was it a MOOC by any chance?
Well, we don't know.
I'm sorry, I can't tell you because that data wasn't, I couldn't hook that up with all of the responses, or I can, but I didn't. I haven't done that yet. Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't done the sort of any cross information. There's just so much data here. So we wanted to know, what does qualified mean? Because clearly people were answering that about people being qualified. So what do you think qualified means? Can you talk to somebody that you're sitting next to and say what you think qualified means in this context of online language teacher education?
I think it's the combination, knowing the subject matter, being different teachers, but then also knowing how to do it online. I struggle to learn that second bit. I think it's not inconsequential. You have to pay attention to that. One of my colleagues in Monterey was teaching a course about online language teaching. It was ages ago. And so I took her course, even though it was about online language teaching, because I wanted to learn about just online stuff. And then when I started teaching, David kind of tutored and said, you had to sit in on sessions, just running, meetings. Oh, I heard that. And then I got a grant at MIS. Oh, well, one of my students, Sarah Springman, was very, very technical. I paid out of the grant and paid her to teach me. So I got a grant. But I don't have and it's funny because I'm not a Every now and then, my anime students will say, if I get stuck in the virtual classroom.
1 minute.
They'll say, okay, try this, and they'll coach me wherever I'm stuck. It's funny. I don't know if it's because they're virtual natives or those are the ones that have taken courses from Anaheim and know the system. I think he's all right. He's not here. David's here. I don't know. Yeah, he last time I saw him.
Okay, thank you.
Really good.
Yeah.
So this was a short answer question. So here are some of the short answers. They think it was experienced teacher educators, somebody who had formal training in teacher education, somebody who'd taken a workshop or course about online teaching, somebody who designed an online course, had been in a position to mentor others, which I thought was very interesting, had taken an online course, had taught an online course but not OLTE, and had taught multiple online courses. So people have very different views. Do these resonate with what you discussed? Yes. And the problem is there is no official qualification for teaching online language teacher education. Right? We don't have certificates or degrees or anything in doing that yet. Okay, so the next two areas, next one area, but with two slides I want to talk to you about is the experience with technology that people had, and there are two direct quotes. I'm going to have to read one of them because it's rather long. I would love you to be able to read it, but it's long and therefore the font size has to be small. I first taught one of my online courses as a face-to-face course for 2 years and began supplementing it, that is the face-to-face course, more and more with online material. Each time I taught the course, I migrated additional components online, for example, threaded discussions and chats. Then in 2000, I moved the entire course online, using my own web pages and Yahoo groups for interaction and file link uploads. Finally, the course was migrated to a course management system, eCollege, which housed all components in one space and made things even easier to manage, technologically speaking. The synchronous component, however, was still conducted outside of the CMS, using Yahoo groups at first, then Yahoo Messenger, then Skype, because the CMS did not provide for two-way communication. I developed my skills with the technology over time, and little by little, as my course developed. So I think this is very interesting that this is a gradual learning process as people are trying to figure out what works best for them and what is in the technology, what isn't in the technology. And when Matt comes to talk to you about the various configurations, you'll see that this becomes a major issue for many people of what is available or isn't available in a CMS. Okay. And here is another example. I think you can read that one yourselves, right? So again, this is common, I think, that you think you know enough about technology, and then the students ask you questions that absolutely flummox you, right? Okay, so now I'll hand over to Dr. Christensen.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, I was suddenly giving you an official title.
You are. Nobody else does, so that's great. I'm going to just talk from back here, unless that's going to mess up the mic, is it, or the recording, Ryan? Just because I can't see. So I have to choose, can I see you guys or can I see my slides? So that, I think, brings us to the changing roles that teachers experience when they move from a face-to-face classroom to teaching online. And so this slide, I think, is interesting. I'd like you to look at that for just a minute. So the perceptions, the perceptions that teacher educators and teacher students have of the technical support. So for teacher educators, that was their perceptions of the technical support that they were offering their students. And then the teacher students, it was the perceptions they had of their teacher educators. So I don't know if these same things kind of stand out for you, but when Denise and I looked at it, we thought this was really interesting. So the difference between here is sort of reasonable and helpful. So as you can see on this slide, the teacher educators, 40% thought that they were giving reasonable support, but only 20% of the teacher students thought so. So immediately when I looked at that, I thought, oh boy, you know, the teacher educators uncharacteristically were, you know, thinking they were better at it. But in fact, it's quite the opposite, because if you look at the next one, you know, reasonable seemed to be a lower standard than helpful. Only 4% of the teacher educators thought that they could consider themselves helpful, right? But look, that goes up to 24% for the teacher students. So when you look at the total of those, they're kind of like flipped, right? So to me, that says that the teacher educators are more modest in their understanding of what it means to be helpful and provide technical support online. I also wanted to point out the bottom where it says not provided. It's really not a negative comment. It's that they were very clear that that was not the role of the teacher educator to provide the technical support, that there was someone else who provided the technical support, so like a helpline or another number that they could call or so forth. So those roles, I think, are emerging. I know, at least for me, teaching online the first time, everything came to me, and I was not able to answer a lot of the questions, but I worked at it. And then eventually we got a helpline. And so I just say, you know, if you're having that technical difficulty, you know, call the helpline, and it's great to have that support. So let's talk about this. This is always a big issue, right? What about the workload? So study this for a minute and get it in your mind what you think about this. So this is a little bit different than from the previous slide, because in this case we were asking each group what they thought about the workload for themselves. So teacher educators were giving their perceptions of the workload for themselves, and then teacher students were doing it as well. So how many of you think that, you know, teacher educators, so the people that are, you know, giving the course, that they would answer that it was number 1? How many of you think number 1? Interesting. 2? 3, which is the same as face-to-face? A little heavier than face-to-face? Much heavier than face-to-face. Wow. Interesting. Amazing. I think most of you are in agreement on that. Okay, now, you know, think about what you think that the teacher students would say. Okay, so that individuals who are taking the courses. Number 1? 2? Okay, so there's some hands go up. 3? 4? Or 5? Okay, so, interesting. Okay, so let's look at this, their perceptions of workload. So you can see how the teacher educators fall out. You were 100% correct that the largest group of people, 46%, felt that it was much heavier than face-to-face. And a little heavier and much heavier constitute 74%?
Yes.
So, interesting, huh? And look what it is, the biggest for the teacher students is just basically the same, 43%, or a little heavier, but not this upswell of heaviness that you see with teacher educators. So interesting. So one of the challenges, I think, in doing this kind of research is just to figure out how to ask questions and how to get, you know, how to understand what we mean by the units in which we're offering online language teacher education. So we needed to unpack the difference between a course and a program. And so courses we thought of as units that comprise a program, but that also includes workshops. So for example, if you were doing PD and you had like a series of PD workshops that students were going through, and those were like sequential and they were part of a group, that could also be called a program. Okay? So, and then a program was a unified set of courses that collectively formed a curriculum and led to a certificate, even, or a degree. So here are the different ways that we conceptualize courses and the responses from the participants. I think that you will find this sort of interesting, and it was unexpected for us. But you see the highest ranking there for the teacher educators was courses leading to certificates, which was surprising for us. And the highest ranking for the teacher students, I mean, there were 2 there. So either they were in courses leading to certificates or they were in courses leading to a master's degree. And that surprised us that there were so many online courses leading to actual degrees. So I always, we were wondering how are programs and courses marketed? So what do you think? Will you take a look at these? So hours, days, weeks, months, years, or are they marketed by the academic names such as quarter or term or semester? What do you think? And what do you think the teacher educators in this survey thought? And then the teacher students, what's the highest?
I think it depends on who the teachers are ultimately going to teach.
Mm-hmm. Who the teachers are ultimately going to teach. So say more.
I work in industry, and the industry is never going to do this for a semester.
Absolutely.
So I'd be talking weeks.
Okay, so in non-academic environments, in industry, the preference, she said, is for weeks. Any other ideas?
I'd say that for a lot of teacher students probably think of it as either quarter or term. When you're teaching, I usually just think it's this quarter
or however that institution configures the idea of the term, right? Yes, Nikki?
We use hours because our courses are aimed at practicing teachers, and they need to understand the workload. So in fact, we do hours over 8 weeks, so 70 hours over 10 weeks.
So combining the two. Yeah, excellent.
So they understand the workload, the reality.
Right, that's interesting, very interesting. It's very helpful as well. Okay. So here's what we know. These are some things that we thought you might look at here. And you were going to say something else about this, right, Denise? A little bit about the...
Well, it sort of goes back to a point I made earlier, that it seems from these data, but I can't be sure, that maybe the sort of shorter courses that are run particularly in Europe that tend to be, an online 4-week course, and they may end up in it with a certificate or not, may not be well represented in this group. And certainly in the first project, I could not get anybody from those sorts of institutions to participate and write a little vignette about their institution, even though many of them were, I approached many of them, and I even knew some of the people. And it's because they work on, they're paid on hourly basis, they don't have any time to be able to do anything extra, research or anything like that is not part of the institution and whatever it is. So there are a number of pieces of data like this that seem to imply that we did not have that sort of group of people. If we did, it was very few.
Well, let's turn our attention now to learning management systems. So we wanted to ask them their preferences for the learning management system. So it's interesting. We put a list of LMSs that we thought were quite common. So teacher educators preferred WebCT, I mean, at least this group of 137, followed by the locally designed learning management system, and then followed by Blackboard, then Moodle, and then Canvas. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with these, but when you look at the teacher students, the first two are sort of reversed, right? So they have the first 1 and 2, and the first bottom 2, and the middle ones are reversed. So they all kind of fell out in a similar order. But it's interesting to note that we also asked, but what other ones are you using that aren't here? And we have we had so many listed. I mean, so these are all either learning management systems and applications. So they wrote all of these things in response to learning management system, but some of these are applications. But if you look at this, it's probably the reason, for example, maybe Skype and GoToMeeting are up there is because the learning management system didn't have a way to have a real-time, visual sort of way to connect. And things like Google Docs and Wiki Pages are probably there because the learning management system wasn't allowing for ways to do group work on the same document. And so this might be a manifestation more of the limitations of learning management systems, than just their preferences for all of these things. But some of these I'd never heard of before, so I had to quickly get up and start looking things up. But it's a lot, certainly a longer list than we had anticipated having. Any comments on this? Yes?
I have a question. When you asked about the learning management systems, did you have individuals rank these, or did they only select one?
Oh, that's a really good question. This was done on the basis of how many of the 446 respondents chose the initial ones, and then the rank order was done on the basis of the total number of the percentage of individuals who chose the ones. So that's kind of how it fell out. We did it that way because I wouldn't want to make an assumption, that the 5 we put up there, were in some way preferential over others. It was just a place to start in a way and to engage, the participants in responding to this item. So these are all the features now of learning management systems. So, we have our favorite learning management systems, but why? What are the features of a learning management system that we prefer? So we have up here that the learning management system has an application for asynchronous discussion, for synchronous discussion, for assessments for learning, that intelligent tutor opportunity, easy upload of files, effective messaging, facilitation of group work, flexibility, online tutorials, tools for interaction, storage of personal files, which for some students is important, tracking grades, and transparency. So what do you think for teacher educators? What do you think the teacher educators valued most from this list? And how about the teacher students? Well, it's so interesting to get the results here. So this is when you see, by the way, like 9.5 and 9.5, it's just because they ranked, the percentage was ranked the same. And so with the 9.5, you'll see that there are 2 9.5s, but there's no 10. And so that's just a way that we prepared the data to make it accurate, in case we wanted to do like correlations or something like that at a later point. So you can see that the number 1 for teacher educators was tools for interaction, right? So that idea, that traditional idea of the importance of interaction in second language acquisition really shows through. And that messaging and communication was number 2. But for the students, the teacher students, you will see that they were thinking about, their tracking grades and personal upload of files and things like that to help them manage the course. So we also wanted to know about their reasons for selecting OLTE over face-to-face courses. So I'll read these to you, and if you can't see them from the back, maybe you can tell me what you think. So do you think that the reasons for selecting OLTE, so this would be the teacher students, okay, the reason they selected OLTE over face-to-face, would that be because of schedule conflicts and with work and face-to-face classes? Would it be because of their schedule conflicts with commitments with other work, that they thought it was easier, there was no face-to-face option, their friends and colleagues recommended the course, the online courses were cheaper, the online courses were flexible, the ability to study at one's own pace, or then we also gave them an option of other. So, what we have here for the teachers, educators' responses would be what they thought of their teacher students. So not for themselves, of course, because online educators often don't get to choose in that way, but the teacher students, that would be for themselves. So when you look at this, you will see that the number one reason that educators thought their students chose the courses because they had conflicts with work and the face-to-face classes. And the number two reason was that the online is more flexible. But the number one reason for teacher students was that the face-to-face was more, or that online was more flexible, and the number two reason the same, that they had schedule conflicts. So this flexibility is just a huge component of online language teacher education. So for anybody who's designing courses or thinking of curriculum, you know, building that flexibility in is a huge factor in the choice that teacher students make in selecting online teacher education courses. I mean, I think we already knew that, but it's nice to have this confirmation from 446 other individuals. So here's their experiences. For example, Denise asked you about how many of you had experiences, and so for this population, here we go with the number. So it's interesting to look at teacher educators. So their experiences, they had the most experience with asynchronous online classes. So everything done online, nobody getting together at the same time. And the same for the teacher students. When we look at preferences, so what do they prefer? I thought this was interesting. The number one for teacher educators is the enhanced course. And I'm thinking that that is sort of reflective of the lack of confidence that we saw among the teacher educators for their skills with technology. You know, so, you know, give me my face-to-face course and let me experiment a little with the online technology so I can enhance it. But look at the teacher students, their preference was for totally online, synchronous. That was kind of surprising to us. But they love the online, but they still want to connect, you know, this idea of professional communities and communities of practice is still really important for the teacher educators, and they want that, or the teacher students, and they want that. They have less experience and they don't prefer the flipped, but I think it is a relationship between their experience and actually their preference in that case. So let's take for just a minute the reasons for their preferences. I think you'll find this interesting. What do you think? Why did they prefer? So more face-to-face interaction, more opportunities for peer interaction, flexibility, more opportunities to work at their own pace, more opportunities to use the online technologies, less overall work, preference for working alone, ability to access course materials from anywhere in the world, more opportunities to solve problems, more interesting, or some other reason. I think that you will find the results here interesting because the reasons for preferences were the same for both groups. Not the percentages, but the ranking of the percentages provided the same information for both groups. So their top 3 reasons: flexibility in scheduling assignments, again, huge for both teacher educators and teacher students. And for number 2, more opportunities for students to work at their own pace. Again, flexibility, but on a personal level, and the ability to access course materials from anywhere in the world. Again, flexibility.
Oh, sorry. Yes. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I was in a dream world. Okay. So let's move it on to the conclusion. This is just a snapshot, clearly, right? And the data, 446 is a good number, but it's still, again, only, a percentage of the people who are involved in this particular work. So the full research report is available, and you've got the little bookmark that was at your table giving you the TIRF online. And you need to go to look at publications, and under publications you will find the link to the full report, and also to the previous one if you haven't already seen that one. And the executive summary is also available if you want to send that out to people. But unfortunately, and that one has been changed online, so the correct number is there. So if you want to send it as a PDF to people or give them the link, then you're welcome. Because we would love you to just distribute it as widely as possible. So we've now got time for questions, I believe, right?
I was curious what percentage or how many of the respondents were people who had taken part in one of the e-teacher programs, because that's an enormous program sponsored by the State Department all over the world. Did you get a sense of that? Not at all?
No.
No. We don't have a sense of it. It's not that none of the.
Yeah, no, but I mean, it didn't come up
We
somehow.
don't have a sense of it. No, it didn't come up.
Huh.
Well, it did in the qualitative data.
Okay.
And so that's data that we haven't really fully analyzed yet.
Yeah.
So,
I was thinking of the sheer numbers of that
yeah,
program. They're just
and I
enormous.
know that the survey went out, but we were expecting many more given how many embassies and friends in embassies in the English language divisions that we talked to. And we could try again, but that's, yeah.
Because that would definitely have some effect on the
Absolutely, it would.
And when you
yeah.
think that we sent it to 185 institutions and got 446 surveys back, but it was from a much smaller subset of institutions than that, clearly. Yes,
Yeah,
Richard?
the first slide, when you had the 95% qualified teacher educators, and the 78% who were qualified online, what's the Venn diagram of that? I mean, that's more than 100. But, I mean, was it a large number, 95? Did they also feel they were, or a small number felt they were part of the qualified online?
They could check whatever applied to them. So, for example, I could say, I'm an experienced teacher educator, and that qualifies me. But I'm also I've also taken some courses in how to teach online, so I could check both of those. So it just gives you a sense of the overall number of individuals who felt that they were qualified as a result of any one of those categories.
Did you think there's a good overlap? The teacher educators are getting trained to do online, or they're kind of just winging it because they're teacher educators, and that's what they do?
Well, quite a big percentage did actually have some sort of online
70.
training.
Okay.
70%?
I'm trying to find it. Why is it you can never find anything when you're looking for it?
See, where did it come from?
Oh, I got it. I see what you mean. Yeah, okay, that answers my question. Thank you. You don't have to go any further. I think that was
This is the one, right?
Yeah.
So 70% said they'd had some formal training. So.
Yeah.
But
But
what
the whole
that,
universe was teacher educators.
Here.
This wasn't mixed students and educators. This is the teachers.
Correct.
This is who is teaching.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so, you know, that's 70%, but we don't know what the online instruction was
No.
that they had. You know, it could have just been, you know, a one-on-one, somebody helping them do a little bit. We didn't quantify any of that.
Yeah,
Liz?
that's a very interesting thing to pursue in a later study, but the universities I've been involved a little bit now are requiring new hires to have training in online, whatever their subject area is, and that takes different forms depending on the institution. And so a person in your subject base might have had internal institutional training, or not, may have had Quality Matters or one of those other for-profit, you know, certifying bodies, approval, certification. So we don't know, and that would be the subject of the future study.
Yeah, it is very interesting, yes.
I think in a couple of slides, if we go forward, you talked about what it means to be qualified.
Yes.
Are these ranked in order of frequency? These
No.
qualities?
No. They were just what people answered in the short answer.
Do you have a sense of which of these might be more important than the others, or may have occurred more frequently?
No, we don't have a number of that.
I think we do, but we haven't looked at that yet. I mean, it's an interesting thing that you learn when you're doing survey research, that the relationship between the data that you actually get easily and the question that you ask. If you knew that in advance, you would ask different questions, because some of this, for example, I had to go back to every single 446 individual and look at the response for that and pull it out in order to get like percentages and rank orders and things like that. So yeah, I do think we have that, but we haven't analyzed for it yet. But I think I understand where you're going with it, but say.
Just one more question. And these are responses from the teacher students and the teacher educators, or?
It was just teachers.
These were just teacher educators. Yeah.
There was somebody else who had.
I was just going to add to what Liz said, that some universities now require that you've completed some kind of an online training course, and Quality Matters is what comes up a lot, before you're allowed to teach an online course, even if you've been there for many, many years.
But I think it's interesting. I think this is coming, this idea of, you know, what it means to be qualified to teach online. But it's interesting to note that 95%, no, how many percents, I forget. But anyway, a large number of teacher educators felt they were qualified to teach online merely by virtue of the fact that they were qualified teacher educators. You know, and so it's a rude awakening when you teach online for the first time, and you've got a lot of experience as a teacher educator, but it's quite a different environment. So I think this is coming in the future, that we want both qualified, we want teacher educators with experience and teacher educators teaching online who have online qualifications. Yeah.
In our discussion yesterday at the TESOL Summit, in one of our small groups, the group I was with did have a real interest in standards, and this is something that came up, is that maybe in terms of evolving standards and where do we go with standards, that this might be an area for some definition.
TESOL does have TESOL standards that were done by people like Nikki and Deborah
yeah, I know the standards, but are there, I haven't been up to date enough to know if there's online education element in it.
Yeah,
Yes, there is.
Well, then I will pass that on to my family district.
Yeah, because they get the full volume, not just a free thing online. They've got a lot of detail on how.
They have to buy the whole book. Yeah, yeah. But that's a really good starting point for most people, even though, like everything in technology, it gets slightly out of date. I mean, a lot of those course learning management systems and applications won't be around in 5 years' time. So this is one of the real problems of dealing with this. But you'll notice that to go back to a question that somebody asked, that numbers adding up to more than 100, wherever that happens, it's because they were asked to check everyone that applied to them. So that was also true for their experiences with different course configurations, just to clarify.
I wanted to make a comment about social media in teacher education in our field and how powerful it is in some parts of the world.
Yes.
Facebook is very powerful and very prevalent in some areas of the world where people are, limited in what they have and so.
We have some data on social media, but we didn't present it here, and it's crazy, right? Because you can't get people to respond to a questionnaire if it's takes longer than a certain bit of time. But I hope that somebody follows up more on social media. We have some that we intend to do more with in this particular research project, but it's huge, actually. I'm stunned. I just barely got on Instagram and realized that there's so much out there, and so many teachers are delighted to form these communities and learn online and learn from one another, and it's a very interesting phenomenon.
Okay, yes, at the back.
I'm in a situation where I would absolutely need to have it be blended, because I would need to model how to do needs assessment on site at a company. I can't do that online. It has to be going to that, until I can videotape every single place in the whole life. So were there any questions that related to people's preferences, or any questions that related at all to the idea that some of it was going to have to be in person and part of it would be online?
If I understand what you're talking about, for sure. So, let's see. Sorry, I think I'm going the wrong direction here.
You're going backwards, aren't
you?
Which one did you want? The preferences?
Yeah.
It's right near the end.
Okay.
There.
So does this answer your question somewhat? So it tells you, no, that's their experiences, sorry. Their preferences. So blended for teacher educators and for teacher students was number 2. My guess is that that's telling us that, whatever environment they're in, they recognize the importance of some face-to-face, but they want also some flexibility, of working together or working online.
I think there would be a difference if your audience were all people working at workplaces.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with that.
But you raise an interesting question, and because the whole question of modeling, which we need to do as teacher educators, is an issue. And how do you address that in online language teacher education? I mean, that is, to me, a big issue that we didn't tackle, but you raised it.
I've had to be at the company site to model how you work with managers, ask them questions versus the target learners versus the stakeholders versus the observers of the safety issues. I can't do that offline. I have to do it offline.
Yeah, Nikki.
Just to pick up on 2 points here, really the idea of some kind of model. What you're saying about modeling because it's teacher education, and what the colleague just brought up earlier about quality, and the fact that new online instructors need to have some kind of qualification, and so on. There's this movement and concern with quality, whereas maybe 10 years ago it was, build it high and then come here. We've gone from that, thankfully. Quality is much better. There are moves afoot. The last 2 years within our profession, so TESOL, an accrediting body has been set up looking specifically at quality assurance for online teacher education programs in TESOL, because they're different to other types of online teacher training programs because of the thing of modeling. If it's pre-service teaching practice, for example, needs to be integrated. Just to get a quick mention of this organization, it's called Acqueduto, aqueduct in Italian, Acqueduto, A-Q-U-E-D-U-T-O, acqueduto.com. I have some information if anyone's interested. The British Council is involved in it, for example. A number of organizations based mainly in the UK, and at the moment we're doing real bridges across the Atlantic to the US, where there's also a lot online. So trying to make this kind of a little bit more international. At the moment it's very UK focused.
That's really great information. We actually had questions about quality, and we just haven't answered. I mean, there were far more questions in the questionnaire than we have talked to you about today. And quality was a big issue of how to measure quality. And what we did ask was about accreditation. And it was amazing how many of the students had no idea whether their institution was accredited or not, and it seemed as though they didn't care. So this whole question of quality is one that I would love to explore further. So thank you for that, Nikki.
Yes, you brought it up in your 2013 report, in fact, Denise, that the issue of
Quality, I know. I didn't just bring it up, I sort of harped on it.
So, Lorraine?
On the issue of quality, I was just wondering, this is very rich, there's a wealth of information here. I was wondering, as a sub-product, whether you'll actually be giving this information back to the organizations that run the courses so that they can do something about some issues. It's very rich.
We did ask people if they wanted to know anything about the report to let us know, and those people gave us emails, and we will send it to those. And we can, I guess, contact the 185 and send them the link, but...
Certainly.
Yeah, me, thank you.
Jim?
Is there any research done to determine what kind of courses will be more suitable for asynchronous versus hybrid? And if so, for instance, look at those things that some people believe certain courses cannot be offered online. You need practice, you need a case study, but some courses are more suitable. And if so, if we can identify those courses which can be purely online, then there's the issue of sharing of the resources, transfer credits, and the fee paying mechanism. So I wonder whether our field has already thought about those things.
That's so excellent, and I think we need to. Yeah.
I think all people have done is think, but not
Think,
realize
but no research yet.
None that I know of.
So I just wanted to, while we had this up, I had an interesting, well, I'm thinking of your comment about needing to be on site to model and how that blended would work well. And I was just having a conversation with Lorraine about the limitations of blended for her particular group. So I think it is so contextual. We mustn't forget about that. You know, we can't group online language teacher education as just this composite. But
Yeah, because I mean, students wanted flexibility more than anything else. I mean, that was the clearest trend throughout all of this data. And for them, the flexibility was, you know, don't constrain me with anything other than maybe to make sure you tell me, which we haven't reported yet, exactly what due date assignments are due. But it's because I don't want to, you know, I don't want face-to-face, and I don't want this because I want the flexibility.
Let me just add that back to my context, because the teachers develop relationships with the needs assessment with their collaborators, and they did the needs assessment free. So the company got that free. That was the hook that allowed it. Of course, I was quality controlling it, but then they took the data back and online using the development of the curriculum. Then the teachers were hired by the company. So this was a job. And if they would not have had that so strongly if they hadn't been developing these relationships in person. Right. Plus, the students also gave me the feedback that the most important session of the entire course was when they went and did the needs assessment on site. Because that is when all these silly articles you had us read made sense, and then we went back and
Well, that goes back to, you know, for more general OLTE, the question of the practicum or teaching practice, and being able to do that in an online environment.
The question is, if your data, as you got it, gives a sense of how online courses are assessed in terms of their effectiveness from both sides, from the recipients and from the teacher educator that designed it.
We do have a whole lot on assessment. Maybe Matt can remember it, I can't.
Well, we have, I think you're talking about the the teachers and the teacher students, or the teacher educators and the teacher students' evaluation of the effectiveness of the course, and then also information on how they make determinations about the effectiveness. Well, that is all qualitative data. We didn't feel like that we could actually get at that with the kinds of questions we were answering in the survey. So we have all of that qualitative data yet to sift through and analyze. So we do have some of that, but we haven't yet gotten to it. But that is the next step to try to figure that out and see what the teachers think, because the quality issue of it was important, but we didn't want to steer teachers. We more wanted them to tell us what their experiences had been. So sorry.
So stay tuned, though.
Stay tuned.
Yeah, I figured it was going to come.
Yeah.
Did you collect any data on possibly like what the teachers perceive to be upcoming in the direction of where online teaching was going to be headed?
No. Good question, but we didn't ask anything about that.
Right, because I think sometimes we get locked into what's been happening. So it's hard for us to think outside the box and like getting around that whole idea of how we model, and it can't be done in an asynchronous fashion, but it's quite possible that there are outside the box thoughts that we're just trapped into thinking in the same way that we've been doing. So I'm interested in seeing what's perceived in that.
Yes, me too. I wish we had some data on that, but we have none. So.
And actually, you raise a very interesting question, because it's one of the issues of teaching a core course, for example, in a master's degree. Is, the moment you try to do anything concrete, it's going to be out of date, and the program's no longer available. So what are the principles, therefore, one needs to teach, rather than the actual, how do you move the mouse here or the mouse there for this particular program.
And that would change based on like digital natives,
Right.
digital immigrants, and how they approach technology and how that's different.
Yeah. Yes.
I have a question about the slide that's up. I see that the teacher educators ranked online synchronous as 5. I'm guessing that's last, right?
I think that's wrong, actually.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. And then the teacher students ranked it as number 1. From your qualitative data, do you have any idea why specifically that might be the case? Is there a particular aspect of online synchronous, apart from the flexibility, that appeals to teacher students and might also deter the teacher educators?
Denise thinks that there's a mistake on the slide, but I can't.
There's a mistake in that slide, because I know that in the prose, I wrote that the teacher students, the one they disliked most was online synchronous.
That would make sense, because they like stability.
They liked asynchronous. So what I think is that what's happened is we flipped these two lines. That's what I was just whispering to Mac, that I didn't know. How many times did we look at this slide? And it was only when I was sitting there as she was presenting it, and when she said it, it was only when she said it, not the looking at it, that I thought, oh my goodness, that I know should be here.
Yeah, I can actually speak to this, Denise, because I've read the study 2 times, and Ryan can jump in here if he needs to. It was really interesting that the students preferred asynchronous.
Yes. Correct.
The teachers
So what-
preferred asynchronous.
so what
And the
should they
deal
be?
was, things like, and this struck me because I teach online in a couple of contexts, and my students are teachers in training. What they want is that flexibility. They want to be able to do their stuff anytime, anywhere. And another thing that came out quite a bit, quite strongly in the report was, I personally like to reveal my course a chunk at a time, like a unit at a time. No, the students want to see the whole course so they can work ahead, they can work at their own speed. It was so interesting to me to see that what the students want is not what I'm doing.
But they don't want you to change it.
Liz said they don't want you to change anything either, so.
Yeah, it's like,
Expectations are different, because in a face-to-face class, often we adjust based on student
Okay, so can you wipe that, the original thought? I do know that the asynchronous for our students was definitely one. And since we flipped this one, I don't know. I mean, my memory isn't that good. I don't know if that one should be flipped too. I just don't know. But I certainly know that number one for teacher students was asynchronous, and number one for teacher educators was enhanced.
So
which I guess is the most important to remember.
So this table is in the report, so, and it's correct,
in the report.
Sorry,
And this
my
actually
apologies.
parallels or coincides with what the students that talk so people. Oh, sorry. It just, with this change, now it makes sense that the students chose flexibility, number one.
Right.
That was what I was having trouble figuring out how those two things went together in the students' minds.
Yeah, I was trying to find an opportune moment to say something.
Yeah, well.
So I'm glad you all brought this up. Thank you very much.
You have to check me.
And thank you, Kathy, for having as good a memory as I have for bits of it, but much better for other parts.
Okay, so one more comment? Yes.
It's a question, comment. So in our university, we're just about to put our master's TESOL program online. The qualifications to be the teachers that do that are the people who do the face-to-face courses. And so that the university said, okay, we want the 6 of you to take your courses and put them online, and that we will assign an instructional design person from the Office of Distance Education to help you do that. But as far as I know, there's no other training or preparedness thing that goes on. So what I was thinking was going to happen today is that I was going to get a sense from what you were saying as to what the elements were of a course that would be similarly attractive to students that they have in the face-to-face course that I do. And as I see, our courses are all going to be asynchronous. So I'm challenged to wrap my mind around how you take your face-to-face course, make it asynchronous, and still maintain those things that I think are interesting, valuable, and necessary, and put them in an asynchronous environment. I can tell it's probably beyond the scope of what you guys have done, but if there are any resources or want to point me in that direction, that would be great.
There are some book chapters that have been written.
So just one thing before Kathy speaks. So these are features, at least, of working online and the learning management system that I think might be important to keep in your mind as you develop a course.
This may be a little bit unfair, but in my experience, sometimes the administrators who say put your courses online, number one, expect that it will be a really cheap way to generate new revenues. And number two, don't understand the kind of teaching and teacher education that we do. So, there's, that line from the Christmas thing about visions of sugar plums danced in your head. That's what I think of as visions of, MOOCs generating millions of students paying millions of dollars. That's not what's happening in our field. I mean, yes, there are MOOCs available and so on, but if we're trying to prepare teachers to work in the ways we believe is important, that belief system is not necessarily shared by our administrators who want us to convert to online. So there's almost like a cultural gap between what we mean by teacher education and what they think it is.
But can I leave on a sort of a positive?
Yes, that was a bit of a bummer. Sorry.
No, it's not just you.
It is time
a lot of it's time to finish. A lot of them, were a bit of a bummer. Is that we frame this in distance learning because I've spent a lot of my life dealing with distance learning, and if you frame in that way, you see that online language teacher education is a lot better than what I did when I did my undergraduate in the 1960s by mail, hard copies of Xerox stuff, right? And a library that came around Queensland once a month, delivering me books from the university. So, we went from that to tapes, audio tapes to videotapes to, computer discs, and the online is far superior to what I got. So on that positive note,
it is progress.
there is some progress. Thank you all so much for the wonderful questions.